climate change, for demonstrations like Fridays for Futures have, and in our case for packaging waste. And we always try to show the community what they can do, and like you said, nobody needs to be perfect. It's better when we have 100 people who are imperfectly sustainable than 5 people who do it 100% well. So every baby step counts, and nobody needs to be perfect. And I think the most important thing for us is not to raise the index finger in warning, but always show the added value, the impact you can have, and I think that's it. And social media platforms are a great tool for doing this. And for, yeah, it's like a virtual megaphone. You can, it's a catalyst, and yeah, everybody can raise their voices and can find information and impact.
Yeah, we will dive deeper in that definitely later, like why is social media a good platform? John, what will be your answer on that first question?
I love the analogy of a virtual megaphone and a catalyst. You know, remember where I'm coming to the conversation is as a professor working with social change-oriented students and a researcher, thinking about how we create more social change in the world. So as I think about that question, where my mind immediately goes is to what is the bottom line that we're after, and that is social change, whether that be related to sustainability or otherwise. So we've got to dial up the best of social media, that catalyst, right, that virtual megaphone, but we also can't underestimate the negative sides of social media as well that I know we'll go into more discussion about. And really to understand if we are trying to be, and we are change makers, is how do we really operate in that expanse, that ecosystem of the good and the bad and the otherwise with social media, and be more adept to navigate those nuances and those complexities which seem to evolve and change by the day with social media.
Mm-hmm. So as we heard already, we have activists, influencers, sustainable brands, and they all can play a significant role in talking about sustainability, taking the talk about climate change and all these topics and promoting the sustainable life. But John, do you also see risk there and problems, maybe especially for brands? When we talk about greenwashing, or when we say, yeah, maybe the informations are not really independent, do you see risk there, and if, which risk?
I do see risks. I see lots of opportunity already being activated and risks. And so in my mind and the work that I do, the two can coexist as we think about social media. And so it's very important, I believe, that we not think in polarities, that it's either good or bad, that it's both, and again, that we can navigate that. What we especially see with brands is that they continually want to be in on the conversation about what sustainability is and what their companies are doing as part of hopefully making the world a better place as it relates to sustainability and otherwise. How we see that coming to life with social media is through the communications and marketing that they're putting out, the storytelling in particular, which is a key area of my work. And again, we see that for good and for bad. What we're really elevating now in many, many countries around the world is getting away from traditional corporate social responsibility to more of really corporate activism. And the expectations of all of us, consumers and otherwise, that companies step up their game, including on social media. So in other words, that they're not just greenwashing, that they're not just communicating on social media about perhaps their commitments to climate, making the climate better, thinking about sustainability, but that it's also backed up with actions. And so the two go hand in hand as we think about communicating on social media, is really holding companies, NGOs, or other organizations accountable that what they're talking about, what they're preaching about, in other words, is also what they're practicing. So there are downfalls when we let organizations, companies, individuals kind of get away by just using social media in those hollow, more promotional marketing senses. It's really up to everybody who's listening, activists, to really hold them accountable and to also use social media as a platform for that. Not just talking, but also listening, so that we really have this ecosystem of ideas and a robust communication system, but also one that's backed up with action on all sides possible. So there are positives, but yes, there are downsides as well.
How is that for you, Teresa, as a representative of a brand or of a brand that offers products also? So is it difficult for you to stay credible in a way that on the one side you want to give good content about sustainability, but on the other side, of course, you also need to make kind of marketing for your product. So is it a tricky balancing act for you?
I think sometimes, but I think the good thing is that we don't want to sell recaps or rebolds because it's not a selling product. We want the recaps and rebolds to be used, to be borrowed, and to be brought back. So it's a circular system, and we don't want to sell these products. And I think that's a good thing for us because the avoidance of single-use waste or packaging is always in the center of attention. And we get together with independent sources like the DUH, the Deutsche Umwelthilfe, or the Blaue Engel, and talk about them with topics in order to be credible and talk with independent sources. But of course, there's always the thing that we want to get a recap and a rebold touch, and take recap and rebold as an example concerning single-use packaging waste and the whole topic of environmental problems, and offer it as a solution.
Yeah, how do the others here in the round see it? Of course, recap, not, as you explained, not selling product, but of course there are brands that selling products means to sell product with topics like climate change. So I think it might be a moral dilemma, like that it's good that brands and as much people as possible talk about these topics, but on the other hand, yeah, they also then try to sell products. How do you, Anya, maybe think about that? Maybe also Fridays for Future, many brands come and want to make marketing with you, and yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, we have a lot that brands come up to us and want us to support their marketing, to advertise their products, which for us is important not to do, to maintain our own independence. But in general, we see a lot of brainwashing. Let's talk about, for example, Munich Re or Allianz, where insurance companies that are both also going into general assembly in the coming weeks, who continue to ensure fossil fuel-based infrastructure, which of course is, while still promoting themselves as like these brands who ensure, who also ensure renewable energy sources, and creating this imbalance where for us as activists it's important to call it out and show the world that they're still making millions and millions off of the insurance of these fossil fuel-based infrastructure projects. And yeah, I think for us it's very much that.
What do you think, Hannah, maybe as the glasses through as a journalist? Of course, you also with your podcast try to influence the people and make them change their life, but more in an objective way maybe compared to a brand or a company.
Yeah, totally. It's really difficult. Can I ask you a question? Because
Sure.
I don't know, how do you finance your company if you don't sell anything? Because I don't know.
Yeah, good question, obvious. Our partners, the coffee shop owners, restaurants, bakeries, they pay a monthly fee for being part of the systems, which covers logistics and customer service. So just other partners pay a fee every month. And for the customers, it's free to use it because they just pay a deposit and get the deposit back when returning the cup and the bowl.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Now I answer your question. Yeah, I think the problem is a little bit in the system. I think it's on the one hand side good that companies get in touch with the topic sustainability, because it's super important that everyone is involved in solving the problem of climate crisis, and big companies are like part of the problem, so we need them to get in touch with it and to change something. And so I see it in a good way that they get engaged, but like John always said, it's important that they get in action really, so that it's not just a nice add-on to make more sales. And I think that's really difficult to see. And but on the other side, it's also time for good journalism to shine, because a lot of companies, they adapt the style that journalism works. So, like giving information, try to force social change, and companies try to do that too. And it's kind of logic, because a lot of companies have so much power nowadays. They're big players, and it's just, for me, logical consequence that companies start to take also political action and try to be part of the party. But we need to have an objective look at it, and companies don't. Yes, okay, they can give objective information, but there's also an agenda behind it. At the most companies, they want to sell something. That's capitalism, that's how it works. They want to sell something, they want to grow, sell, grow. So that's how it works in our society, and so we, as journalists, need to look behind it and say, yeah, okay, the content is good, but there's an idea behind it, and maybe you think about why someone is telling you this information and which information is not given to you. So I think that's the big work for journalists today, always, especially today in this topic, to give as objective as possible information about that.
Yeah, and I mean, your podcast, when we look at that, you also talk about how difficult maybe it sometimes is to have the sustainable life, and that makes it even more authentic, I guess, Raffaele, or what is your aim behind that?
Yes, I think that's true. I mean, for me, it's often very difficult to do these challenges. I struggle very often with challenges I get from Hannah. For example, our last challenge with the e-car, I had to drive with an e-car a very long distance, and you know, the e-car was fucked up when we want to drive back. Yes, it was. There are so many things that I can do perfectly, but I think, yes, that's very okay. And I think the companies are often, so they try to hide some things that they don't do perfectly, but I think in our case, this is not what we bring outside to the people. This is what we don't want to bring to the people, and that makes for us very difficult to work with some companies together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I mentioned before already, we also want to talk about the platforms and why you're using specific platforms. Anya, for Fridays for Future, why would you say social media is a good platform to reach the people and really make a change, that they are not just swiping through Instagram, so that, I mean, they really come to the demonstration, that they really change something in their life, that they are active? Why would you say is social media a good platform for you?
Like you already said, social media is a great way to reach a lot of people. It's this virtual megaphone. And it's a lot easier for us now to mobilize people that we only have to post a share pic, and then it'll be seen by thousands and thousands of people who will then consequently join us in the streets. Whilst thinking about movements before Fridays for Future who had to spend days and days on the street handing out pamphlets to mobilize people to come to their demonstrations. And in that way, we are incredibly blessed to have these huge platforms and to be able to reach as many people as we can do now, because that's really been helping us drive the fight for climate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Hannah, what would you say, is maybe social media even better for reaching people in the moment and making a change, or do you think still both, like online and offline, is interesting?
I think both is important, but online offers a lot of new possibilities to get in touch. in Germany or in our in the radio, we always say talking auf Augenhöhe. So we're talking on the same level. And I think that's great because we as a podcast, we have an Instagram account. Our listeners have an Instagram account. And we're just two accounts connected to each other. And there's not this big difference between the podcast over here and the small listeners down there. But we're more like on the same level. And I think that's a great way to get in touch and to share information. And also the medium podcast is very interesting in this way because we get so close to our audience. So they listen to us via headphones and they listen to us when they're at home, when they're cleaning the kitchen. And that's creating a very intimate space, a very personal space, and a kind of the idea that we are friends they listen to once a week, and I think that's a great way to interact, and they can also give back ideas to us. So it's not just a one-way road, but it's more like a easy way to exchange ideas, and I think that's absolutely great about social media.
Yeah, I think that is one of the big advantages, like really this both-side communication, not just giving something in, like in a newspaper or something, so that you can really get in touch. John, when we talked before, like some days before the panel, you always were the guy that also talked about offline. So for me, it's very interesting. Of course, all the brands and the influencers and activists try to reach as much people, of course, as possible online, but it should be always, or I think it's always quite important also to reach the people offline or to make them come to an event or to really make a change in the daily life. From your perspective, what would you say? How can organizations and companies achieve that, like to really make a change and to really change the people's life? Maybe also like the hope theory can help there.
Yes, exactly. You know, it's as our conversation is unfolding, it's not in either or, right, online or offline, it's an and. We need both. And as the other panelists are really demonstrating, you know, social media is an accelerant. It's an accelerant of social change, but we can't forget to combine it with our desire for offline activity and change to result. So again, how do we really use social media to get to that offline action? You know, I would also argue as we think about social change and brands or NGOs or otherwise other players, is thinking about really the power of human connection in person, and arguably even more important ever before because of COVID, is we have to have the accelerant of social media, but there's still no substitute for looking at somebody in the eye. The world, right, is now hybrid. Look at me as an example. I'm apparently beamed up right above the stage. I'm on Zoom, but I'm looking at 2 camera screens in Washington, D.C., including the live stream on one camera and the stage on the other. It's absolutely crazy. But to think about what I'm missing because I'm not there in person, the side conversations, the ability, right, that I might connect with somebody afterwards to have another one-on-one conversation and think about what action is going to result. So there's benefits, but there's also downsides. We've got to think about with our strategies of social change, not the either or, but the and. What we do see from really smart organizations is really interesting ways to combine that and really thinking then purposefully about what the offline engagements actually are. If I can give you 2 quick examples, one that I really love is actually coming out of Denmark, but is now all over the world, and that is called the Human Library. So the idea behind this in-person gathering, although it's been done on Zoom during COVID, is don't judge a book by its cover. So you're really having human books, so to speak, who are telling their stories about who they are, and you're having human readers who are listening to those stories and really interacting with people that they probably wouldn't be doing on a daily basis, that they might not be following on social media, but because they're able to have that human connection, which goes to a lot of different theories. There's a theory called contact theory, that the more time you actually spend in person with somebody who's different than you, you start to find similarities. Another example that I really have been following that I love is coming out of the US from National Public Radio, NPR, and StoryCorps. StoryCorps has the largest amount of recording of human voices in history. And one of the rather recent projects that they've taken on is called One Small Step. So what they're really trying to achieve is to have people of different political parties who don't know each other sit down and have a discussion. And they can't talk about politics, but what they try to find is the commonalities that they have between people. So again, that's the idea of they're connected, right, online, but then they're taking it to offline. So the smart movements, the smart companies, the smart NGOs of the future are thinking about this unique intersection of the offline and the online. And that gives me hope. I think that is really where we're headed.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that quite interesting examples. Teresa, maybe let's have a look on Recap. How do you do it? Maybe also you have some offline events, or what ideas or strategies do you have, like not just posting something to really get the people in action, that they really change something with their waste? Yeah.
At the weekend, my colleagues were at the Klimatreff, Klimansland, and I think it's a quite good example for this topic, because we announced that we were there, or that we are going to be there on Instagram, obviously, and then we were there and talked with the people who came to us and visited us, and to other brands, and to the speakers, and we talked about it on Instagram. And so the connection between online and offline was very good, and it's a good example. And my colleagues told me today that it was so nice meeting people face to face, talking to them, talking with them about Recap and Rebowl and other things about the festival. So it is so nice after COVID to meet people in person. So events are a thing, or PR actions that we try to do, installations when people can feel or touch and see, not only through the screen but with their eyes. But it's always a connection between things that happen on the street, like Recaps and Rebowls walking through the streets, and with persons which carry them. And it's for us as the employees, it's always so nice when we walk through Munich and everyone carries a Recap, and it's so nice. And yeah, I think it's really the connection between online and offline, not only seeing cups and bowls on screens, but really on the streets and in coffee shops and restaurants.
How is it for you, Anya? I mean, for Fridays for Future, it's really, really important to get the people on the street. And I mean, when we look back, I remember last year in September when you brought like 30,000 people on the streets in Munich. That's really, really important for you as activists. What would you say, how do you do that you really could manage that, and that so many people are coming?
I think the underlying thing that helps us mobilize as many people as we do is the fact that people care. The first piece of news I can actively remember is from 2010 when the Deepwater Horizon exploded. And even then, people were talking about the climate crisis and like the connection of the Deepwater Horizon to the climate crisis. And I've spent my entire life growing up being told, hey, we'll solve it, don't worry, it's there, but we'll deal with it. And then 2018, when the IPCC report came out, and then this movement started growing, we started to realize that people are not solving it. Like every year, from I think when I was 15, it was the first time I actively noticed. The German government announced that they were missing their own climate targets, and they're still doing that. So we started to notice, hey, they're not solving it. And that's something where social media helped us a lot, because suddenly we shared it amongst our friends, and we saw it on a bunch of accounts that it's not happening. The solutions are not being implemented. And people care. And people care a lot, and they're terrified of what's coming. And taking to the streets to protest is incredibly empowering, and it takes away the fear while also showing that we demand and we're ready for climate action. So I think it's less our finesse or our capabilities of mobilization, and more the fact that people really want to protest. People need to protest.
Yeah, but I mean, you were the channel, or you gave them the platform to meet and communicate and like connect all the people. I mean, that
yeah, exactly. But we're merely the platform, and for us, it's been incredibly important. Looking at my friends now, who are also engaging in Fridays for Future, it becomes an important part of dealing with the climate crisis and learning about the climate crisis, and then channeling it into protest. And yeah, we decided to empower ourselves now, but in the end, it's because people care that they come.
So you just had the right topic, we can say. John, what do you think? Can and will digital advocacy replace traditional lobbying and means of protest, or do you just think maybe it will become bigger, or what is your look into the future?
I certainly don't think it'll replace offline, right, and in-person advocacy, but I think social media, again, has the ability to pour gasoline on it, right? We shouldn't be talking about that in our discussion, but as an accelerant, right, as to further accelerant, but that being more purposeful about combining these different strategies. And, you know, as we think about kind of the power of how the two go hand in hand, is also we can't forget about some other kind of subcomponents of really what both of them are at, as we think about how human beings work in partnership, right? The theme of the gathering, partnerships for our planet. And when online engagement is done well, that leads to offline engagement and protesting. It's also about trust building, is we're really trying to establish trust between human beings. And trust is one of these intangible ideas and things that we have as humans, but what actually makes up trust? Well, trust is a sense of intimacy and emotional closeness with somebody else. So how do we have online be an accelerant of that, but again, take it offline? I think more purposeful thinking about really getting trust among human beings leading to change is part of what the future. And also the notion of hope. You mentioned, you know, earlier that I think a lot about hope, and I do, because in one of my previous lives, other than being a professor at Georgetown, I worked for Jane Goodall, the world's foremost authority on chimpanzees, who is the ultimate change maker. And what she talks so much about is the power of hope. And hope is often confused with optimism. And I think it's worth pointing out the differences, because we can think about hope as well with this intersection of online and offline engagement. Optimism is sometimes a little bit blind, that everything's going to be okay, whatever we're meaning by okay, that we really don't have a hand in controlling what the outcomes or the situation is. That's not what true hope is. Hope is a sense of urgency. Hope is a sense of we can choose what to be hopeful about, and we can choose perhaps what not to be hopeful about, whether that's related to climate or other topics that we care about. And what true hope says is that there is that urgency, but also that we have a motivation, is that we see into the future, not just the past and the present, but a future of what could be as we think about having hope, but also that there's agencies and pathways to get there, that we can actually develop a plan for action, whether that be protest, right? Or whether that be reaching out to companies that we want to change, is that there's just so many other ways to think about it. So I just want to offer that to the conversation too, is that it will remain, you know, not this either or, but this and, but also thinking about some of these subcomponents that make up the ecosystem of change, including trust and hope, really important for us to think about.
Yeah, quite interesting. I think this whole hope theory in these topics. Yeah, before now we will maybe dive a little deeper in the strategies and the content. I saw already that you type in some questions in Slido. We will have time for that later. So I will collect all the questions, then we will have time for that. So when you have a question in mind, anytime you can just type it in already via Slido. Yeah, maybe let's dive a little bit deeper in your strategies and in your content. So I'm quite interested what methods you're using to really raise awareness for your topics, for your content. Yeah, how are you doing that?
Okay, I'll start. We use a lot of different platforms. We're really on everything. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok. And of course, each platform works differently, and each platform has a different group of people that will reach there. You'll find my parents' generation on Facebook, but hardly anyone from my generation, Gen Z. But on the other hand, you'll find Gen Z on TikTok and Instagram, and you'll reach them there. And that influences the kind of content we post on each platform. But at the end of the day, what we do is we inform, we post content about the climate crisis on there, which I have to admit is extremely challenging, having read the IPCC reports and then trying to communicate that on social media.
Where you don't have so much words and space.
You have very limited attention given to you, and you're trying to communicate this huge, complex issue and like 1,000 pages worth of scientific knowledge. But then also just informing people about the next protests or a campaign you're doing or upcoming events and petitions. So we share all of that on social media through Reels, through TikToks, through Instagram posts, but also through messenger platforms like Telegram or WhatsApp. And yeah, we just spread the word.
So your strategy is like you have different platforms for different target groups, and then you see, is it for all the same content, or do you really say, okay, this content is just for our Twitter community, and this maybe will just work on Facebook but not on Instagram, or yeah, is it just the same content?
I mean, there are posts that we always post everywhere. For example, when we're announcing a protest, of course we'll post that on every platform. But then when it comes to Twitter, Twitter works very differently from other platforms, because when we take to Twitter, we use Twitter for real-time updates. Like when we see a tweet that shares an insight that maybe we think is important, or an article, it's much easier to just share that on Twitter with a short comment than maybe to post that on Instagram. But meanwhile, on Instagram, we share stories from protests or events that we're doing. Yeah, so they work differently, but at the core, the main things that we post are always the same.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Hannah, Rafaela, how is it for you? What is your strategy? Which platform are you using? What type of content are you posting?
Yes, I think, Hannah, you explained it before. We have, on the one hand, we have our Instagram account, and on the other hand, we have our podcast platform. So we have two different platforms with two different content. I mean, on the Instagram platform is for us like a sidekick of our podcast. So on Instagram, here you have our community. They can talk to us. We can talk to them back. They can send us feedback. They can discuss about the topics we speak about in our podcast platform. And we also post some side informations which we don't say in our podcast. So Instagram is for us a really good platform to get in contact with our Instagram community, and we also try to connect our podcast community with our Instagram community. I think we don't know yet if it works very good, but we try. We try to connect them both platforms. And yes, on our podcast, there's our main platform where Hannah and I have our safe space for our podcast community, and of course they can't ask us questions when they hear our podcast. So yes, the communication is on Instagram, and podcast is the feel-good safe space for our sustainability community.
Yeah. Right. We also try sometimes to go outside the bubble and have cooperations with other podcasts. So we try to connect the podcast fans of this podcast with our podcast fans so that we have some interaction there. Or sometimes we also, because we work for the Bayerische Rundfunk, we sometimes do colleague talks for the radio stations there to some topics we talked about in the podcast. So I don't know if we have like a really fixed strategy, but we also try to try things out and to see what works.
I mean, you have the podcast since 1 year already, so you tried many different things, had many challenges and many different topics. What are your most popular topics? Can you say that, or is it like all the topics quite interesting for the audience?
Of course all the topics are quite interesting. I have to say, I really don't know which are our most popular.
Yeah, I think so. All the topics around food.
Yeah.
Okay. So we seem to have a very foodie community, and I think in general all the topics where we have really concrete advice to do something better. For example, we had an episode where my challenge was to cut down my electricity consumption at home. In 1 week, I had to reduce it to the half. So I switched off the light all the time, and then also had professional advice by an expert who was going through my apartment with me and gave me some tips and advice how to save electricity. And that was really interesting because he told us a lot of tips. What I didn't know in the beginning, for example, is that the Wi-Fi router needs a lot of electricity. Some routers as much as an old fridge, for example. And he said, yeah, at night or when you're outside on the weekend, just switch it off and you save electricity. And that was just really good advice. And on that episode, I got a lot of feedback from people who said, wow, didn't know that. And it's so easy. And if you do it 1 year, you can save really a lot of electricity and money. And that's great. So I think the best feedback is when people actually hear something, okay, that's good, it's easy, I can do it right now. And I think that's what stuck in their head, and it always makes me really happy if they completely and concretely do something.
Did it work with the 50% or?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I will definitely listen to that episode then and get the information. Teresa, what would you say? What makes good social media content for Recap, for your community, that really many people see it and that they really probably try it and change something?
I think the biggest challenge, what you already said, is to make complex content easy to understand, that it's a snackable content and you stop scrolling when you're in your Instagram feed, and your post needs to be the post where people stop, look at the picture, look at the video, read the caption, and maybe they give you a like or a comment or share it. So it's important to create easy content, which is snackable, which is appealing and attractive, and where the users have an added value or can see what their impact is, what impact they can make. So with us, for example, best performing posts are posts where we show the problem of packaging waste, totally full garbages in parks, and people don't like it because they don't like the waste, obviously, but they can relate to it, and that's why it's good content in order to make aware of the problem, to make them aware of the problem. Or another good performing content is when we ask our community to bring back the cups and bowls, and we try to make it in a very exaggerating way, and trying to carry 50 or 100 cups and bowls and bring them back to the partner and say, guys, bring back your cups and bowls and get your deposit back in a funny way, and that always works good.
Yeah, I saw that video. I mean, it's not the goal to have hundreds of free cups at home and use it for everything, right? This really was quite cool. John, your mission is it to help people around the world to spread their stories, to make really good storytelling. So, I mean, storytelling is important for offline, for online, for social media. It doesn't matter. But what would you say? What is a good story?
I wish I could give you a very explicit answer. The academic in me has to give you a more complex answer. Is sometimes a story is in the eye of the beholder. It's really interesting, this panel. It would be interesting to hear everybody's responses to how they would characterize a story, because a story can be different to an activist, right? To podcasters, to journalists, to marketers, to academics. You know, what I look at, especially in my world from an academic standpoint, is there's not one central definition of a story. It's like this epic debate in the academic literature is what actually is a story. So sometimes it's just what's in people's heads, that it doesn't even require words. But that said, there are a lot of frameworks that are out there. So one of the frameworks that we've created at Georgetown that really makes up a more formal story, especially on social media as we think about stories for change, is that they have 6 components in particular. So the first is a character, really thinking again about the human connection. Not character in a literary sense, but a real person is thinking about the relatability. Second is trajectory, really thinking about how that story evolves, that there's movement to it. Authenticity or genuineness, that it's using words that the audience really understands and can react to. Fourth is action-oriented emotions. What really makes up a key effective story is there's included of emotion in it. And it's not just the polar opposites of happy or sad, but that we can have in one story many, many different sorts of emotions, take people on an emotional journey through a story. Number 5 is a hook, capturing people's attention, right? Giving them a sense of what's at stake, whose story it is, how they're involved in it, really important with social media. And the last one that I think is terribly important for us to really think about is the storyteller. So as we think about this work, yes, when are we the storytellers at times, but instead also when are we the story conveners and the amplifier? So really thinking about a story as somebody's personal truth, that we each see the world in different sort of ways. So thinking about giving voice to others, thinking about our work truly with a social justice and ethical orientation is making sure that we're giving voice to others, is that we're really thinking about who is the storyteller as well.
Mm-hmm. And would you say when creators, storytellers, like we have here on the stage, when they really pay attention on these 6 points that you mentioned, the stories, the content in social media is then more successful and maybe create more change in the people's life?
That's right, with some other factors in the mix as well, but those are components that really resonate. What's interesting, though, that I think with storytelling for change as well, is that sometimes we need to push our audiences into uncomfortable territories. While we want that engagement, right, that traditional engagement on social media, I think there's also an argument to be had to tell stories in different ways that might cause people to think in different ways. That maybe success isn't a whole bunch of likes or shares, but that there's different forms of success, is that maybe we want to tell a more complex story about a scientific topic. Maybe there won't be as much engagement, unfortunately, but that's still important types of stories to get out there. So, again, it's this both and, is how can we really combine these effective components of storytelling, really reach our audience where we want to reach them, but also at times as we're trying to move the needle, right? We're trying to create change here. How do we not only give stories that our audiences want to hear, but also perhaps some stories that they need to hear?
Mm. Yeah, so I would also say good content depends also on the target group. Hannah, what would you say? What is your target group, for example, for the podcast? Because I think you need to have that in mind when you think about topics and challenges, what you're trying.
We want to reach younger people, so around 20 years, and the idea is that they just maybe moved out, starting to have their own apartment, starting to evolve a political sense or a political idea and are interested in the topic sustainability, but not really far away from being pros in this topic. And I think the actual listeners are sometimes a bit older, sometimes a bit younger, so we have a lot of different people listen to us. The oldest one is my grandma. She's over 80 years. And yeah, but I think the main target group is rather young people. And our idea is to share. So we are young people too. So the idea is that we, and we are also pros on the topic sustainability. So the idea is that we start on the same level and learn together. So Rafi and me, we are trying things out. And it was really interesting to hear what a good story makes, because that's exactly what we had in mind by planning our podcast stories. We wanted to have facts and information, and we tried to put it into interesting story, and that's why we made up the challenge thing. So we have to tell a good story, and no one knows in the beginning if the challenge is made or not. And we have some funny parts. We have parts where we just struggle, where we are annoyed by things, where we don't know what to do, and we mix it up with information, and we talk with experts on the topic, and we really try to put that all in our podcast episodes. And I think what we can also see is that the people who start to listen to an episode, normally it's natural that they get less during the end. But in our episodes, it's kind of the same level. So it shows that people really want to hear how the challenge is coming out. So it kind of works for us really good. And yeah, the idea is that we learn together and that we get more intelligent together, and that it's okay to have feelings of annoyance and to struggle sometimes. Yeah.
Teresa, how is it with your followers? Is it more that they are already aware of the topics and maybe even already advocates, or is it more that you help raise the awareness for this topic?
I think it's both of it. There are the heavy users that use Recap and Rebowl because they want to avoid single-use packaging, and they already know a lot about the topic, about sustainability, about reducing waste, plastic-free alternatives, whatever. And there is the other target group who knows Recap and Rebowl, for example, because they saw it in a coffee shop, in a restaurant, and then they checked it on Instagram. And then they come to our platform, and now we've got the chance to give them an added value, to tell and to explain something to them about packaging waste, about plastic-free alternatives, about sustainability in general. So I think it's both the heavy users and the one we can give an added value and educate in a way, inform them.
How is it with you, Anya? Because I think I just think what John mentioned is quite interesting. On the one hand, maybe you have the topics where you think, what might be interesting for our target group, but on the other hand, I think you also have topics where you think the people need to know that. So is it like 50-50, or how do you come up with the content?
I think it's very much dependent on like what's actually happening, like what's being released in terms of scientific publications, what we're working on right now, what campaigns we're working on right now. I mean, but for us, a lot of it actually depends on the medium. So social media is something where we post bite-sized pieces, like fun facts about, or fun, I mean, but facts about the climate crisis, or maybe we were working on the common agricultural policy of the EU a couple months back, and then we post like little snippets of what's happening or what's important to know about that. But on the other hand, it's hard to have people engage and like really learn through social media. I mean, I noticed it myself. I spend most of my days sitting at my desk reading scientific papers of like hundreds of pages long, and then I'll go on Twitter and I can't even finish a thread that is 10 tweets long. I mean, so there we try to reach out through press, trying to get interviews in press where we then can communicate in the way that John described earlier. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you have both sides, try to make it short, but also use other platforms then as well. John, as you're sitting in the US, as we said, in Washington, D.C., and maybe you have a wide view on that, do you see global differences between USA and Germany concerning like content, storytelling, topics in these fields?
I'm sure there are some cultural considerations or differences, but my work is mostly focused on is what's the same, is that there's much more in common between people. I think that what makes us different. And so one of the things again goes back to what I mentioned is trust in particular, is people want to be in relationships where they trust people, and that's a crucial aspect of creating social change. And what we see is that there are longitudinal studies about trust globally, but also, going into country specific. And what kind of the headline is that there's a trust deficit around the world, is that there's declining levels of trust in many, many institutions around the world. In the US, what's kind of interesting to see in these studies is that there is more trust in corporations and companies the last number of years than there is in government. Perhaps not too surprising, right, as we think about all of the complexities of government, but it really suggests one way to think about it is that there's a really, really great opportunity for companies to walk that talk as they think about sustainability in particular, going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the session, is to sharing, right, the work that they're doing regarding sustainability on social media, but ensuring that they're taking advantage of this trust to do audacious things that go back to really how their company is performing. So really thinking about some of those kind of unique aspects is something that might help us as change makers and activists, thinking about how do we encourage these different players, especially through trust and how it's evolving over time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, another interesting topic where we also talked about in some of the preparation calls before, I think that was quite interesting. I came to that topic many more times with you. That is cancel culture. And John, I want to ask you at the beginning to explain a little bit, like for the audience that don't know that. So what is cancel culture and why should we talk about that topic today?
Well, I'm also interested to hear how the other panelists would characterize cancel culture too, not just myself, but I'm really, it gives me a lot of pause thinking about cancel culture. I guess to put it most succinctly, it's really something where you're shutting down somebody else, whether that be on social media or in person or whatever the modality is, you're not agreeing with them. It could be perhaps for legitimate reasons as we think about social change, right? Or it could be just disagreement, and so you're kind of canceling their ideas, and it's really a loss of an opportunity to engage in discussion. So that's really what I'm fearful of. I think there needs to be, and probably will be, a lot more research about it. I think social media is accelerating cancel culture, and just again, not having this opportunity to really talk and connect about really complex issues, sustainability or otherwise, that are facing our world. So if we go back to the theme, right, of Innovation Week, Partnerships for the Planet, partnership is about uniting, not dividing. So how can we make space to get around cancel culture, to actually have discussions that we may disagree with somebody, but that we can also find commonalities? One of the ways perhaps that we can do that, offline and online, is through storytelling. That stories are such a unique communication and connection vehicle in humans, is we communicate through stories. So stories can at once be kind of a dichotomy. We can have understanding that we might be different as people, that here I am an American, right? And we have Germans, right, primarily at the event, but that's a difference. But actually we also have a lot of similarities as we think about life, right? As we think about what our goals are in life, that we might all have a grandmother who we admire. Whatever the case may be, is we can find these commonalities. So cancel culture is shutting down an opportunity for change.
Hannah, when I got you right, with your podcast, you also try to avoid cancel culture. How are you doing that?
Yeah, we think it was a really good idea to say that part of our podcast is that failing is allowed and okay. And because Rafi and me, we're not really the sustainability pros, I think the idea when people listen to us is something else than if there's a super sustainability pro talking to them. So we gave ourselves the allowance to make mistakes and to not make everything perfect. And with this, I think we kind of slipped out of the problematic zone that people can say, you did a mistake, that's not good, because sustainability is your thing and you're doing it wrong. So that's kind of good for us. Till now, we don't have any big problems with shitstorms or something. And yeah, but I think it's a really difficult topic, and I think about that every day because it, since we're doing the podcast, I think both of us, for both of us, it's also a private question. We think about what can we show on social media, what can we do in our private life. Would it fit to our podcast idea? Can I still take a flight to Ibiza? No. So that's what you automatically think. You take the role of the mean internet observer, internet troll that is watching you, and then I think, would I do this? I don't know. So it's kind of a difficult thing. But I think to be honest and to say, hey, I mean, the idea that everyone is doing everything 100% person is just utopic. So still, on the internet, a lot of mean people think that if you're talking about climate change and protecting the environment, then you have to do it in every shade of your life completely right. And if you're not doing it, you get some hate. And I think to be honest about that and to have, to understand what is going on in people in the internet and just to talk honest about the fact that we are humans and we do mistakes and we can't do everything right is a good base to talk about, and it's important. And I think by doing this, we kind of slip out of the problem. I hope so.
How is it for you, Anya? Because you're not in this podcast and say, oh, it's just trying. So how do you handle this, like with shitstorms, or even just the fear of a shitstorm to really try to make it perfect? Or I think I can imagine for you it's a quite serious topic.
Yeah, the issue that you just illustrated is a big issue for us as activists. I mean, we've probably all heard of hashtags like Langstrecken-Luisa and stuff. And as activists, we're often faced with the question, how far can we go? And also, I mean, we are activists because we care, because we do want to protect the climate. And then we're always faced with the question, how much can I do? To what extent do I have to be this perfect person before I can actually become an activist? And I think that's dangerous because what we actually demand as activists is systemic change. It's the complete renewal of the way we produce, the way we use, the way we live. And most of those things aren't actually influenced by our daily habits. They're influenced by political will. And this whole discussion about if you've taken a plane in the last 5 or 10 years, you cannot be an activist is a way of discrediting activists who maybe only discovered the issue or started implementing solutions to the climate crisis in their lives a few months ago. And I think for us, it's more important to actually understand the issue and care about the issue than to actually be like this perfect person. But also when it comes to shitstorms and on social media, it's dangerous, truly dangerous, because this hate that is fostered on social media does translate into real life. And what we've seen over the past months, which is absolutely terrifying, is that people have been attacking climate activists. There's been one in Vienna and one in a city in northern Germany that I sadly can't remember right now, where people have either shot at activists or tried to set camps on fire. And these are people, mind you, who are actively trying to save the basis for our lives, the most important thing that sustains all life on Earth, a stable climate. And there's people who are attacking these people, who are actively trying to do these people harm. And that's much more terrifying to me as an activist than the stuff that's written on social media.
Mm. But there's also the other side. Of course, I can really understand what you're talking about. It must be really, really hard sometimes, or not just sometimes, always. But on the other hand, there's often this criticism that climate protection is not really inclusive, so that exclude a lot of people. So how can one be inclusive? So there is always this argument that not everybody can afford sustainability.
Sustainability is a lot less expensive than we think. The new IPCC report, the Working Group 3 report, has a very nice infographic on it. The price of renewable energy has plummeted over the last decades. I think solar energy right now is as cheap as 3 cents per kilowatt hour or something. Meanwhile, coal energy costs 10 cents. And that's a massive difference. We're talking about significantly reducing the cost of living while also improving the quality of life by cutting out these heavy emission things that cost us a lot of money and replacing them with cheaper options. And a big issue we have, and the reason why it feels less affordable to live sustainably is because there's been massive government action to sustain the fossil status quo. For example, now with the war in Ukraine, the gas prices have increased, and as a reaction to that, instead of making public transport cheaper, the government introduced the so-called Tankrabatt, which cost us 3 billion euros instead of 2 billion euros for cheaper public transport. And we're continuously telling people to take the car to produce more emissions instead of giving them the chance to step away from cars, to take public transport and also just improve air quality then, which improves quality of life. Same goes for plant-based foods. The UBA, Umweltbundesamt, recently said that a huge improvement for both public health and the environment is if we lower the VAT, the value-added tax, on plant-based foods. And these are things that we could do. And purely, the only thing that is required is political will, is for the parties and the people in power right now to say, OK, we'll do it. And suddenly, life would become a lot cheaper, and we'd become healthier. And so it's purely political will that is stopping us from having actually affordable lives.
So, Anya, I have the perfect question for you from Slido. How do you evaluate the difference between individual, corporate, or political responsibility when it comes to sustainability?
OK, let's start with personal. The personal responsibility is to encourage the political will and also the will to change an industry. So as people, what we can do, and the most powerful thing we can do, is to take to streets to demand climate action. When we do that, we've done the most powerful thing we do. There's nothing as powerful as angry people, truly. And then, of course, governments, they're the people in power. They're the people who make the choices, who set the framework in which society and industry act. So we need governments to step up to actually decide that we don't want 2 or 3 degrees warming. We want 1.5 degrees warming. And that, actually, we don't. But point is, that's what we've deemed acceptable. And we want to focus on that. So we need governments to step up and give industry the framework to act and support industry in becoming climate neutral and saving our climate. So everyone's important, but everyone has a different role to play.
All right. Thank you so much. I would love to stay with you at this topic because it's quite interesting to discuss with you these questions. But yeah, time is running quite fast, and we have some questions also here in Slido. When you have some more, just type it in. Type it in as the final topic. I will come with you now to more have a look on the future. So. I think it will be quite interesting first to have a look on maybe what changed already in the past years since you started with your different actions and what you already achieved. So maybe Teresa, you wanna talk about that a bit. You have a good point on that, I guess.
Yep. Since I started at Recap, working at Recap, we had about 3,000 partners, returning points for recaps and rebowls. Right now, it's more than 11,000 in whole Germany. So I think that's a very, very big step. And furthermore, last year in January, in spring, we had the federal government passed a law which says that every shop owner, restaurants, whoever offers to go and take away food and drinks need to offer a reusable alternative as an alternative for single-use packaging. So this law is obviously a very, very great milestone for us because that's the thing about packaging waste. That's what we were talking about since Recam was founded, and now it's very, very nice to have this political support.
Mm-hmm. How is it for you with your podcast, Hannah and Raffaele? Do you have kind of a goal, and maybe you can say like how far you are away from it, or do we just try to have and to reach as much people as possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we have like this one big goal. I think the main goal is to make small steps. Mm-hmm. Actually, in the beginning, we also thought about a name for the podcast, maybe small steps. But it didn't make it. But still, we still have the idea that, I mean, there's also not this big point in the whole society where we reach total climate friendliness for everyone. So we don't have that goal for our podcast too. We want to show little steps, little advice, how to make small things in your daily life a bit better. And we always say every small step counts. Small step counts. And I think that every small step anyone who's listening to us is doing is a goal for us. So we achieve a lot of goals, I think.
Yes, so
many small goals.
Many small goals and many small steps are also a big goal at the end of our way. And also we have to think about what is the end of our way. So it is never an end. So we also have to do steps, smaller or bigger. I think it's not so important. I think the important thing is that we do steps and we move forward and we be a better version of ourselves every day, or we try to be a better version of ourselves every day. Sometimes it works out, sometimes not, but yes, the important thing is that we try.
Yeah. Every person who's switching off the Wi-Fi router at night is a goal for me.
Okay, hopefully all of you in the future, like start tonight, start directly. Yeah, maybe we have a look then also on the topic like storytelling and content. John, what do you think? Will storytelling and also online content change in the future? And if yes, how? What do you think?
I think what will change is that there will be continuing to be technological evolutions and even more channels and mediums to connect and to share and to organize. And I think that's a good thing. But I also think there are things that will not change. And that is, again, human connection, is using social media as a tool to also lead to offline action. But I think, you know, kind of a thread that runs across any of that is just a sense of urgency, is that as we think about sustainability, is that we all definitely do have a role to play as individuals, as companies and organizations, but there definitely is, more so than ever before, an urgency to this work. So my former boss, Jane Goodall, often says, together we can, and we all can make a difference, but now she also says, but will we? So as we think about storytelling, as we think about online engagement and otherwise, the question really becomes, will we make these changes? Will we be part of the process? And what's the alternative? So we have to not only do that ourselves, but encourage others to get involved too.
Mm. And to that, there fits another good question from Slido to you, John. What do you think, what's the future look like, especially when you look at using social media for advocacy? Are there any specific challenges or even opportunities? What do you think on that?
I think that there is going to be a new paradigm, has to be, of ethical use of social media, is really, again, getting away. The smart companies will realize that actually it's not only good for the planet, it's within their own best interest to get away from really strategies or tactics like greenwashing, these hollow commitments and things like that. And instead, what the smart companies are doing already, including through the use of social media, is making big commitments, making big changes to their work with supply chains, with commitment to human dignity through their workforce, so that there's going to be a collision of all of this that happens externally, right, through the typing of the keyboard or through our mouth, is that there is going to be even more acceleration of true actions that then are communicated through social media and not the other way around. And that is too, the glass half full, that gives me a lot of hope, is that there's continual pressure and evolution from individuals and societies for exactly that to happen, because it's demanded, is that those companies and otherwise are rewarded, and social media is a good tool to hold them accountable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there's also another good question for that topic, maybe for Anya. We talked about, or John talked about trust before. What would you say? How can you, as activists, build trust? Or more importantly, do brands, activists, and others have an obligation, like moral or otherwise, to identify and fight misinformation?
How do we build trust? I mean, the way we build trust, the way we act, and I think what makes us so good at what we do is that we communicate the facts. We take what science tells us, and that's what we tell people. So for us, really, how do you build trust? You talk to people, and you're honest about what you feel and what you experience. But at the same time, you share these experiences of also very negative emotions like despair and loneliness. And then based on those, you work together and you find ways out, and something that So, but then when it comes to building trust, for example, with governments, I think we struggle a lot more with that. I do a lot of lobbying, so I actually go to talk to our government and try and figure out and try to explain to them what our issues are with their policies. And I've been met with a lot of people who just truly didn't care. I've sat in conferences with very powerful people in Germany and Bavaria who then spent half of the meeting on their phone. And on one hand, that's disrespectful. And on the other hand, what they're telling us is we don't actually care. We're here so we can say we've talked to you. And nothing destroys trust like people openly showing that they do not care about this thing that is threatening livelihoods all over the world.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. So you also try, when you see misinformation, you try also to correct that information. Is that also what is your content about sometimes?
Yeah, we do try when we see that that a weird take on a situation is going over social media. We do try to respond to that, especially like what we've seen a lot now is that people can't afford climate protection and stuff. And we try to illustrate that we can afford it, and it's actually relatively cheap to preserve the climate. Yeah, so we do try to counteract misinformation. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, maybe, as I said before, time is running quite fast, and maybe I take one last question here from Slido. We will see who wants to answer. Is there a silver bullet to encouraging participation and support? Is it just flashy content, or do you think it's solely based on interest in an issue?
Both. I've been talking a lot. I think it's truly both. It's finding a way to have good quality content on social media, because the only way you attract and keep attention is by having quality content. But at the same time, if no one cared about the climate crisis, we could have the best social media team in the world, and we'd get nowhere. So it's truly both.
All right. What would the rest say? Would you?
I would definitely agree. It's both of it. And I think that's a challenge as well, having a good and qualified content which informs, but which entertains in the same level or to the same time. I think that's always the challenge, the mixture of information and entertainment and education. And like you said before, we've got topics we need to tell because, we need to tell because we think our target group wants to hear it. But there are also topics we as a brand, as activists, want to tell because that's our brand topics. We need to talk about topics that are not that nice because it's awful facts about climate change, but as well, these are the topics that need to be talked about.
Yeah, I think there's this one thing that people need to understand, it's that it's really urgent to do something, and that the whole climate change movement thing, information thingy, is about the base of our life, and we need to do something about it. And I think that's the thing that people need to understand. And I truly believe that everyone who understands this is also willing to do something. But I think the problem is that most of the people don't get the situation we're in at the moment. And we need to find some strategies to bring this idea, no, it's not an idea, it's a fact, to bring this fact to the people and to make them understand what we're doing and why we're doing it and why we need to have them in our team. And I think that's the basis, and we need to spread it as much as possible, and then we have some strategies and tricks to make it more appealing to the people, but this bare fact is just the basis of it all.
Yes, I completely agree. I think that every one of us here in the discussion round fights another fight against the climate change, but I think every single fight is absolutely necessary, and you are more confrontative in the outside, we are more maybe funny and low-key, but both of them ways are completely okay and necessary.
Yeah, maybe we make one last round with one last question. So I think it will be nice at the end when you say maybe what is your wish or your vision for the future. Maybe we can make one last round on that question. Anya, do you want to start?
I mean, the wish and the vision is clear. We want a future or we need a future where we've managed to stabilize our climate at 1.5 degrees warming by the end of the century. And also a future where we've done the work and we've really done everything we need to provide environmental justice. Just the other day, Sunday, was the 80th year anniversary of the water crisis in Flint. People in Flint, it's been 8 years that they haven't had clean water. And this is an issue that illustrates the issue of the climate crisis very well, because it's a low-income community and it's a predominantly black community, and they've been ignored the same way that younger generations have been ignored when talking about the climate crisis, and that needs to stop. And the vision we have for the future is a future where minorities and young people are heard, and also where we've done the work to protect the climate and to actually provide a livable planet.
All right, thank you. Rafaela, what would you say?
My wish for me personally is that I do the best I can do to protect our world and our climate, and to reach as many people as I can to do the same. And I know this is a small wish, but yes, I think the small wishes are also big for me personally.
Yeah, I have a lot of wishes too. I think the biggest one is that we have a more honest discussion about sustainability. So speaking especially for our part of the game, that we stop talking about why Luisa Neubauer has new sneakers and why this is so bad, but focusing more on the positive things and that we do something. And yeah, I just wish for, especially for the internet, that people just listen to each other more, because there's, I think, especially for sustainability, a lot of people are afraid of it because they think that we want to take away something and all the fun and the cars and and everything is forbidden. But it's not. It's just to make things different, and they would get it if they would.
We have very much fun in our podcast.
Sustainability is so much fun if you give it a chance. And I wish for people to just give it a chance and to, yeah, just try it.
All right. Teresa, what are your last words?
It's my wish that everybody understands that it's not a hard thing to change something, to make, like you said before, a better version of oneself, and that he or she can make a difference, have an impact, and that people get the information they need, inform, talk about it with others, and that they are not afraid to fail, because that's totally fine and nobody needs to be perfect, but every step counts.
All right. John, so you're the last one for this question. What do you think?
All order. My wish, my hope, and what I think can happen is that we recognize that we need to use every tool in the toolbox to create social change as it relates to environmental issues and other issues as well that we haven't even discussed today. So we need to use social media, but we need to use other forms of engagement and strategies as well. And as we do that, we consider not only what we're doing, but how we're doing that change work. So in other words, thinking about who is not currently in the discussion that needs to be from an equitable standpoint. And when we really understand that we have more things that bring us together as opposed to tear us apart, that's going to be an important mindset from which to operate on. And what unites all of us, if nothing else, is that we have one home, planet Earth.
Yeah, thank you all for this last round. I wish you like a lot of success, and that you can even motivate more people to try and live more sustainable, and not just only that, like really get involved into the offline world, go to the demonstration, use Recap, listen to the podcast, try the things. I think all of you, you're really great role models for us tonight. So thank you so much for being here and spreading your stories, talking about your the information that you could give us. And thank you also, of course, for you, dear audience, here offline and of course also online. You were fantastic. Sorry that I couldn't ask all the questions from Slido, but you're just invited to stay here for a while. We have some drinks outside now, so you're very welcome to stay a little bit more. Probably you will also stay a bit more, so we can the rest of the question we can discuss now. So thanks for being here tonight, all of you. Feel free to stay a little bit longer, and I would say see you all soon. Thank you so much.